Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. I am Lee Wilmot, not Rob Guest, because he has been the lucky one and taken the international break on annual leave. But I am joined by Alasdair Gold today. Welcome, Alasdair, who is not feeling very well, it must be said. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. It's only a bit of man flu. It's nothing disastrous or major, but I just might sound. I've just done a big old throat clearing, so occasionally I might sound like, is it Phoebe in Friends when she tries to sing "Smelly Cat" when she's feeling a little bit rough? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
No, she was actually better when she had the throat problem. So you're suggesting to every one of the viewers and the listeners out there, this is going to be a better podcast because of you having man flu.
That's a big ask. It's probably highly unlikely, as I've already got the cold sweats, all that kind of weird stuff. So, yeah, but we'll rattle on through. There's bits and pieces about Spurs we can talk about. It's the international break, so we'll probably need something to alleviate the boredom.
It's so boring. So boring right now. This first international break of the season, straight after the first few games of the season and right after the end of a transfer window, is just the worst for us journalists. There's not much to talk about, but we still have targets over our heads, and we still need to write content that we want you guys to read, and we've got to make it interesting for you guys to read as well. And it's a struggle, isn't it, at this time of year?
It is. Listen to you with the behind-the-scenes content for the podcast listeners. Yeah, to be fair, it's probably a struggle for everyone else as well. It's just so boring. It's like we've just got the Premier League back. Why are you 3 games in, like just taking it away again? It's very cruel. I really can't believe that many people particularly care about the international break. It could be wrong, but it just feels like we got proper football back, and it's been swiped away from right in front of our eyes again.
Yep. I will also say, while Alasdair might have some throat clearing going on today, we did do a test run, and Alasdair was asking if I had a TV on, which I don't. It may well be my 2 dogs, one of which you can probably see just down this way, who is snoring. And I think it would come through on the mic, but apparently it was on the test. So apologies to anyone who can hear some snoring in the background. It's not any of my family bored by my voice. They're not here today. It's just me and the dogs. Anyway, where should we start with the podcast today? Europa League squad announced last week. Don't think you and Guesty did a podcast around it last week.
No, it was afterwards. Yeah.
The big news: Djed Spence being omitted from the squad. Fraser Forster was the one that we had conversations about, and I say in the office, we work remotely a lot of the time, was the one that we were having conversations about. Would he be the one that dropped out, given that Djed appears to have got his career back on track under Ange Postecoglou? But no, it was Djed, the unfortunate one. Do you want to talk us through that situation, Ali, and what it really means for the young guy, really?
It's a big risk. It's a big risk of a decision. Obviously, Guest and I have been banging on about the whole homegrown numbers, foreign player issues, all of this for a little while now. It kind of feels like it's our hobby more than work. We just always on top of those numbers. And yeah, it was always going to be the case that they were going to have to make quite a big decision. One of them's not too big a decision. Sergio Reguilon, we're going to talk about him a little bit. But the other one was going to be someone was going to have to miss out. And, had they signed someone else in the last day or so of the window, it would have been 2 players would have been left out of the eventual squad. So very quick kind of summing up of the differences. Premier League squad, absolutely fine. They could actually, even if Reguilon doesn't go, they could include him in the Premier League squad. There's space if needed. Europa League just has this different set of registration rules. One of the key ones being under 21 players. You can't just shove them on a list like you can in the Premier League. They've got to have been at the club for 2 years previously. So they then, the likes of Archie Gray, Lucas Bergval, have to be included in the like the bunch, as it were, the main squad bunch. And yeah, Spurs stuffing themselves completely by poor squad management, really, over the years of just not having any now outfield senior club trained players in their squad, which is a ridiculous situation to get yourself in. They literally have 2, and it's the goalkeepers, Brandon Austin, Alfie Whiteman. Max Robson, technically in the under-21s, could be considered that, but with no disrespect to Max, he's not really around the first team setup particularly. He's had the odd little moment. I think he played a bit of one of the pre-season games but not really a player that we're likely to see too much of unless he has this incredible development spurt over the next couple of months. But all of that meant that they had to leave 2 players out of the squad. One, Reguilon, as we say, pretty much an obvious one. The other one, Fraser Forster for me felt like the one that there was less risks attached to. I could kind of, I'm trying to put myself in Postecoglou's head. I can understand that maybe he doesn't trust Austin and Whiteman as backups to Guillermo Vicario, and he feels that he should have Forster. Was he 36 years old, former England international? There's a lot of experience there. Still not entirely sure he fits his system, but I kind of understand why his head might go in that direction. However, to leave out Djed Spence throws you into loads more problems because he hasn't really got a lot of defenders to play around with in the first place, because that was an area we spoke about before the window closed, that the left side of that defence, left back, left centre back, it's probably the area where they're a little bit lacking in terms of numbers. So you take Djed Spence out of that, who was able to cover as a left back as well, and really get an injury or two, and you are really struggling to fill that back line. And you're having to rely on the players who will have already played in a Premier League game, let's say 3 days earlier. And yes, I know lots of people want to always say, put your strongest team out, but in reality, you can't do that. You can't play your strongest team every 3 days in every competition, because either they're going to just end up being knackered and lose games, or even worse, they're going to get injured because they're overplayed. And Postecoglou said a couple of weeks back that the key for him this season he feels he'll get the best out of his big players because they won't be playing every single minute of every single game. They won't have to. But in the Romero suspended from the Qarabag game, the first one, because of his Milan red card a couple of years ago, which still counts now 2 years on and applies to all European competitions. So you're starting to already look at that and think, right, well, does Van de Ven have to play? Because can you really play Ben Davies and Dragoshin and then have to play a doggy at left back as well? In that, honestly, there's so many permutations, and Pedro Porro has to play every game because there's no other right back. I mean, what do you think about it? It's a risky decision, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought so. Particularly given, he seems to have rejuvenated his career at Spurs at the minute, and it's kind of seen now. Emerson Royale's gone, which a lot of fans will be cheering from the rafters about. He's the backup to Pedro Porro on the right, and he's been used, as you say, as a left back option if Destiny Udogie's not been there, which he wasn't very during pre-season, obviously. So I didn't really understand it. I thought I just wonder if it could set Djed Spence back a little bit after appearing to kind of get back to where he wanted to be. I mean, he's had his own issues. It's been a lot of his problems, I think, that have caused him to stutter while he's been at Spurs. Has had those loans, and now he's come back and seems to be, from everything that we've heard from Ange Postecoglou, that he seems to have got his head screwed on now. He's really focused on training. He's got himself in proper shape, and he's got his mindset right for the season. I do fear it could set him back a little bit. But in terms of the squad, I think you wrote about it that most managers would like to have 2 players for every position, essentially, just in case of injuries and because of the workload and everything like that. With Archie Gray coming in, you can play him at right back. With Radu Dragusan and Ben Davies, you can play them at centre back. You can obviously play Ben Davies at left back as well if you need to, but there is no one else. If you play Ben Davies as a centre back, Destiny Doggy is only the left back. If you play Ben Davies as the kind of backup left back, there's no other centre back to have 4. So a bit of a strange one for me, because I can't see Ange Postecoglou making a change at goalkeeper apart from in the Carabao Cup. I think the Europa League will be important, perhaps in the early rounds of the FA Cup as well, you could argue. I think the Europa League is important. The way the expanded competition works now in a whole league phase, you can't really afford to kind of drop points. You knew with the group stage, you could win 4 games and get through. So 2 games you could lose effectively and still get through the group stage. In the league phase, with it changing every single week, with teams playing different other teams, obviously, you need to be in that top 8 to avoid an extra set of games, essentially. So yeah, I can't see him changing the goalkeeper really. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that Fraser Forster's there, because I can see Guillermo Vicario starting all 8 of the Europa League games.
Ooh, it's a big shout. Maybe. I think mainly you've got the numbers with the goalkeepers. That's the area you do have. You've got Austin and Whiteman with Vicario, and you've also got young Luca Gunter as well, who's a very kind of promising young goalkeeper. And they've just given Brandon Austin a new 5-year contract. It's a bit like, what does that say? It's if Fraser Forster does start all these, and of course, yeah, Archie Gray can play at right back as well, but it's just we're not even taking into account injuries. This is Tottenham Hotspur. There's always injuries. Honestly, I just feel like we're going to get into a scenario in one of these Europa League games where they're going to have a real makeshift defence. You have someone ends up like Archie Gray playing at centre back and Pat Matasar playing at right back or something like that. You're just going to end up with these kind of strange mishmash of players because, yeah, he's kind of gone for the experienced option. I'm intrigued to see what he says on Friday at the press conference, because that's kind of one of the things he's going to have to talk about. Yeah, and in terms of Djed, I think he's had a terrific summer. It's been really important for him, I think, to turn everything around. I would hope that the communicator that Postecoglou is, this will have been put across in the right way. He won't just said like pointed at him and laughed or something and said, "You're not in." I would hope it's more that he'll have been told, "Look, you've already played 2 of the first 3 Premier League games. You've come off the bench. I'm going to use you in the Premier League. We're going to have to rotate. Pedro's not going to be able to play every game. And neither is Destiny, and you're going to be playing in those. Carabao Cup, I'll give you all the minutes in that." I'm presuming there'll be some kind of trade-off that he'll have said, "Look, you're already going to get time as it is." And yeah, we'll see. But there's so many games in the Europa League. It's like 8 group stage fixtures that after that they can tweak the squad and change it for if they get through to the knockout stages. But it's a big call. It really is. And yeah, it is a shame. I do think it's a shame for Djed Spence in that regard, because I think he would have started every game. I would personally would have played him in every single one of them. And it's just kind of, all part of this journey he's been on to try and get back to where he should be really as a player. And yeah, it doesn't help. It doesn't help, but it's also a club issue that they've allowed themselves to get into this situation in the first place where they're having to leave people out. But yeah, not ideal.
It's one of those things, isn't it, that you don't really even take notice of when you've got Harry Kane in your team, you've got Oliver Skipp in your team. Eric Dyer was a weird one actually with the Europa League and Champions League, wasn't he? He wasn't club trained because
Harry Winks,
but Harry Winks, you don't really think about it, and I don't know. It kind of brings up different issues that fans will talk about. It's like, oh, where have all our homegrown players gone? Where have all of our kind of English core, where's our English core gone? That we kind of spoke so highly about a few years ago, and the likes of Danny Rose, Kyle Walker in the England setup, and then Dele Alli was there, obviously, under Mauricio Pochettino. It felt like half of the England squad was was from Tottenham, and now we've gone to Euros, obviously, just now, and didn't have a Spurs representative, which was a shame for James Maddison, obviously. So yeah, we've kind of gone a bit full circle in that regard.
Yeah, they are fixing the issue. I think, in a couple of years' time, they'll be all these 18-year-olds they're signing are probably going to be able to be registered, probably as club trained, actually. Association trained is a weird one because, and I don't like this about the way they do the Europa League squad. So Spurs have actually got quite a lot of association trained players. They've, you've got the likes of Maddison and Spence and Forster and players like that, and Archie Gray, one of them as well, and Ben Davies, and I think it was 8 in total. And you're not, but you don't feel any benefit of that. It's not like, oh, well done, you're using players from your own football association or anything, which is what we want. It's just, oh yeah, you can register 4 of those in a separate group, but anyone else you've got, they've got to go lump them in the main group. Yeah. I don't understand the logic behind that. You're almost being penalised for collecting the kind of players that they seem to be encouraging you to collect. I think, look, overall, yes, of course, academies the ideal way through that they want everyone to do, and that's where Spurs have that little. I mean, to be fair, Jose Mourinho pointed out a few years back, didn't he? He said there was this gap in the players coming through from the academy he was looking down at that point. It was to the likes of Alfie Devine and Dane Scarlett back then, who were like, I think they were both 16 at the time. And he was saying there was no little kind of middle section coming through. And he's been proved absolutely right, because no one's come through to fill that void. There's no kind of real, Skippy was the last one, played 100 games for the club. And obviously he's now a Leicester City player. So they absolutely, hopefully, will fix that for years to come. But they're kind of paying the price of not producing enough talent from their own academy.
It does go in fits and starts with a lot of clubs. This situation, doesn't it? You have a kind of a good batch from the academy, and then it goes quiet for a little while, and it feels like we're kind of in that little recess for Tottenham at the moment. You brought up someone else, obviously, that was left out of the Europa League squad, Sergio Reguilon, which everyone would have been expecting to see. What is the situation with him at the moment? There's been a huge overhaul of players at the club this year. Ange Postecoglou has done exactly what he wanted to do, and kind of, I don't like to call it deadwood, but he's got rid of fringe players that he doesn't see as part of his plans, that were never going to get games under him. He's told them to go and find other clubs, and they've done that, except one, it seems, who is still there and could still move, couldn't he, in the next few days?
Yeah, because my ears are blocked up, I thought you said Jedwood. That's really weird. Why would you have Jedwood at the club? Yeah, Reguilon. I think everyone's just waiting to see whether he goes in the Turkish window. Essentially, that's probably the key one that closes on the 13th. And he's been linked with Besiktas. Jose Mourinho, obviously, at Fenerbahce, was the one who signed him for Spurs. So you never know whether everyone's just waiting to see what the best possible deal they can do for him is. If he sticks around, I asked Postecoglou about that. It was when Lo Celso was still there. It was on deadline day, and I said kind of what happens, and he was quite strong on it, as if to say, well, it's not going to affect us in the first team, as if to hint that maybe he wouldn't be involved. Personally, again, it's not the way he might want to go, but you would think, especially as you are struggling a little bit for left backs, maybe if he has to stick around anyway, you at least register him in the Premier League squad as a last resort. Oh no, we're stuffed, we need him, kind of thing. He clearly doesn't see him as part of his system or setup, but you would probably have an experienced player like that on your squad list if you had to. Yeah, it's just, honestly, that 2019 and 2020 windows, when you look back at them, 2019 obviously was an absolute disaster, and they're all gone now. 2020, there are still, I think, is Reguilon the last one? I think he is actually out of that window. That would have been the Bale, Højbjerg. There's various other ones, but I think they're all gone. Potentially Joe Rodon as well. Was he that window? Was he 2020? Trying to cast my mind back to it.
My computer appears not to be allowing me to open up a new tab, so I can't exactly check for it at the moment.
I've got a feeling I look back and 2020, Reguilon was the last one, and he came with so much promise. He's a Real Madrid player. It was very exciting. Good friends with Gareth Bale. It was like, oh, what a nice kind of link up there they're going to have, and it just never really worked. He's one of those guys that defensively isn't quite good enough for the Premier League. And going forward, he kind of threatens to be really good going forward, but never probably produces enough in those attacking areas. He did a reasonable loan at Brentford. Not great at Man U, but at Brentford he did okay. Although Jay Harris, who used to cover him, he covers Spurs now for the Athletic, who used to cover Brentford last season. Every time you mention him, he's like, yeah. It's not very effusive in his praise for him. And I think the problem as well is, and this is the funny thing, do you remember when we used to moan about like the wage structure at Spurs and how it stopped them doing this and doing that? It kind of over the years has gone the other way, that actually Spurs pay reasonable, pretty good wages to a lot of players and then can't get rid of them because nobody else in Europe can match the wages. And they end up having to do these kind of daft payoff things, like essentially presumably happened with Tanguy Ndombele, that, Nice were never going to pay him the sort of money he was on at Spurs, so they had to pay him off. And Reguilon, I think, has been the issue. I'm sure, he could have ended up going to Brentford, but Brentford, I don't think we're going to pay the kind of money he was on. There's been a suggestion that he wants to play for a Champions League club. I kind of wonder whether can you be that choosy at this point when nobody's really lining up to sign you. Maybe a bit different when he's a
He
free
was,
agent.
yeah, he was left at home for the tour, wasn't he? Because he was exploring other opportunities and nothing happened. That's months now, really, that he's been so. As the individual, you've got to temper your expectations somewhat, or you just say, well, I'll run down my contract, I'll get paid what I'm getting paid at Tottenham, and then we'll look again next year.
Yeah, I don't think the money's there in Europe. That's the problem as well, is that a lot of these clubs in the European game, there's just not the money awash in their leagues as there is in the Premier League. So it's very. I mean, you look at the fees that Spurs have got for some of their players, and actually the disparity between it. So like Lo Celso, they signed him for something like 55 million all in, if you include the loan fee and the cost. And I think he's gone for a fraction of that to Real Betis. And ironically, Oliver Skipp, who's isn't like a Copa America winner and things like that, and isn't a full international like Lo Celso, he's going for like 20 million or he's gone for 20 million to Leicester. So yeah, the kind of the game in Europe is just not a lot of money there whatsoever, and that's why Spurs have, to be fair, they've got them out the club, all bar Reguilon. It's just they haven't exactly stoked the transfer coffers with loads of money for them.
No, quite. The list has eventually appeared. My laptop has done its job and got a tab up. So Gareth Bale, Joe Hart, Carlos Vinicius, Joe Rodon, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, Matt Doherty, Giovanni Lo Celso permanently after the loan before, and Sergio Reguilon. So yes, he is the last standing member of that 2020-21 season transfers in.
Oh, talking about if you want to see the difference in who they signed to fit each manager, just look at that window compared to this one. It's like they're all older players, aren't they? On the whole, pretty much all of them, bar Rodon, are all older players. And although Reguilon wasn't that old at that point, but and then you look at this one where you've got Solanke, Werner, and 3 18-year-olds or so. It's like it's 3 18-year-olds and a 19-year-old, if we're going to include Berryval in this one. But yes, Spurs transfer dealings. I think they've kind of spent the money. It's just about buying the right players, and they just have failed consistently to do that in so many windows, or trying to buy players that fit a manager that don't then fit the next manager in any way, shape, or form.
Yep. Yeah, and you're talking about transfers there, and there's another thing we wanted to bring up on the pod today was the free agents situation. Now, a name that is always around in a transfer window has been talking. Well, he seems to have been talking. Adrien Rabiot is back in the headlines because he doesn't have a club at the minute. Seems to be linked with everyone under the sun every single January, every single summer. Did he go to Juventus? Was it only last year, or has he been there for 2 years now? I'm not quite sure, but he appears to be back in the news. What are Spurs gonna be looking at any free agents at the moment, or do we think Ange's done? It's one of those where that I look at it and think it smacks of desperation sometimes. If you sign a free agent, it's just to fill a gap that is in your squad.
Yeah, I think for Spurs, I can only see them doing that if there's an injury that's going to impact them in the kind of probably months ahead. It would have to be, because Postecoglou is very clear on he doesn't like stopgap players, short-term players. He doesn't really like that idea. Even when I asked him about signing another centre-back and why he didn't, he was just like, because there was no one out there that I wanted. And it's as simple as that they've got to fit his system. They've got to be very specific. And you kind of think that the players that you look at on the market, the free agent market right now, if Spurs had wanted them or Postecoglou had wanted them, they would have gone for them by now. I mean, Rabiot is a good player. I think he's quite an expensive player. I think he's got very kind of high wage demands, and I would say it's probably an area of the park they're quite well stocked in. Like I say, you'd have to have a big injury there. Otherwise, again, you are kind of blocking the path of some of these other players that are very talented coming through as well for someone that probably going to be, like I say, a short-term solution for you. What if I had some people saying, why are we not getting Sergio Ramos? He's there to be got. It's like, it's 38. He's probably going to have about the same pace and ability to fit into the high line as you or I have got. It's like, it's a terrific player, don't get me wrong. He's had an incredible career, but I would not really be wanting to put him in that back line for Spurs, because it would just be a horror show for him. He'd get exposed week in, week out. I was looking at the other ones as well. Anthony Martial, I think he's still.
Oh, that old one, that old chestnut, the one
Yeah.
that was linked with Spurs 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, that was when he was it Lyon or Monaco? Where was he?
I think it was when the first year he'd been at Man United as well. I think there was a link with
that
with
as
him
well.
to Spurs, yeah.
Yeah, but before he went there, Spurs looked at him as well. Joel Matip was another one. There's another centre back that's kind of on the market. He
scored for Tottenham last year.
Well, this is true. He already knows what that feeling is like. There were other ones that people were looking at. Depay was one that people kept saying to me. Obviously, he's gone to Corinthians now. I think Hermoso, was he Atletico Madrid? He's gone to Roma now, as centre back. But yeah, I personally probably wouldn't dip into there unless there was someone that just filled a gap because there was an injury. Otherwise, we talk about some of these young players, these 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and you look at people like Mikey Moore coming through and stuff like that. I wouldn't want to block them just for the sake of it. That's why some people aren't even sure about Timo Werner signing on a loan move, because that is a bit of a short-term thing. I think with him, it was more that he fitted the system, and Postecoglou kind of had already worked with him for 6 months, so it was it made sense because it was such a cheap deal. But yeah, I'd be surprised unless we have we don't have a horrendous international break injury that is going to come in the next couple of days.
Well, he's always said, hasn't he, Ange, that he wants players who want to be at the club. And if you've got to the stage where your contract's run out somewhere and you haven't had discussions with Tottenham before, doesn't seem like you want to be at Tottenham. I think the stuff that's come out today is quite funny, obviously, because I think Rabiot made comments a few years ago saying that Tottenham wasn't his level, essentially, and now is not with a club. There's that very U-turn that supposedly he's been offered to Tottenham. I think Arsenal have been offered him. I think he's been offered everywhere, essentially, because he hasn't got a club for this season. So, yeah, I'm with you. I can't. As I said at the very beginning, now I think it smacks of desperation in terms of signing free agents. You get the business done before that, don't you? So,
okay. So.
Do you want to talk to us? We're about halfway through the pod. Do you want to talk to us about the benefits of using our sponsors, NordVPN?
Of course. I wish NordVPN could make me feel better right now. That'd be really helpful. They have a whole lot of services. I don't think fixing man flu is one of them.
No ibuprofen attached to NordVPN, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm halfway through my ibuprofen at the moment, so I'm hoping I'm in that kind of the good stage where it's really kicking in. But yeah, NordVPN. Look, I say it all the time because I believe in it. It's the fastest VPN in the world, and that means there's no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. Something I've used so many times over the years, so many different countries. I'd love to see whether it keeps a list of all the different countries that you actually use it in, because there have been so many covering Spurs or just on holiday when I've kind of wanted to access things back home and things I wanted to see, or even at a game when we can't get a little replay screen. So I have to plug into Spurs Play, which I have to use a VPN to make my device think it's back in the UK, and it does that. Or likewise, if you're back in the UK, you can make your device think it's abroad in a different country, so you might be able to watch things that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to watch, or you might be able to book things. It could be flights. You could book it from the other end, from your destination of the journey as well, and that can make it a little bit cheaper for you sometimes. There's a security element to it as well, in that sometimes public Wi-Fi even can be a little bit dodgy, and Nord will play its part in helping lock up your device to a certain degree as well as it can against such threats. And also, we've got a really good deal on it as well, because to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/Gold Guest. And our link will give you an extra 4 months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box in case you just missed it.
Well done. We're coming out of the end now, depending on when you're listening to the podcast or watching the podcast. We're coming towards the end of this international break now. We've got another round of matches to be played tonight, that being Tuesday night, if you're not listening to it on a Tuesday. And it's so far so good. I'll touch wood. So far so good for Spurs.
You've just jinxed it, haven't you?
Hopefully not.
Absolutely jinxed it.
Hopefully not like a certain other team that we will talk about very shortly. Dejan Kulusevski captaining and doing very good things for Sweden. He's helping Lucas Bergvall very nicely as he gets to grips with playing for the senior team in Sweden. Cristian Romero doing Cristian Romero things for Argentina, being excellent as ever. Do you want to talk us through what's been happening on the international stage for Spurs players so far?
Yeah, it hasn't been anything. It's we spoke at the top of it being quite a boring international break, and it's kind of been that way with the matches. I think that's a good thing though for Spurs.
Yeah.
If it's boring, it means that nothing particularly bad's happening. Hopefully, but yeah, I think kind of Lucas Bergvall is probably the main thing, in that he'd already made his debut for Sweden it was almost like a B-sidey type thing that was picked. I think it was just the Allsvenskan players. I don't even think it was during a normal international break. It was before Spurs signed him. But this is technically his kind of real introduction into with the proper stars around him. And he's come off the bench a couple of times. First game, he got a little bit of criticism for that he was probably trying too hard and things weren't coming off. Second one doesn't seem to have been like that. And Dejan Kulusevski, the captain for this international break for Sweden as well, which is brilliant for him. I mean, he's only 24 years old. That's quite an honour for him too. And yeah, it's been some quite nice interviews coming out from the Sweden camp with Bergvall, with Aftonblad at the Swedish media outlet, probably killing the pronunciation of how they're supposed to be said. Just nice little bits and pieces. He spoke about, do you remember the Bayern game when he was suddenly looked like he was choking or having real issues? Apparently it was caffeine chewing gum. He'd had a bit of a nightmare with his boot. His boot had ripped apart, and then he came off and felt like he'd lost a little bit of his rhythm, so had like a caffeine chewing gum thing to boost his levels, to get him going again. Forgot to get rid of it before he came back on the pitch, and ended up almost choking on it as well, that explains that one. What else has he spoke about? He spoke about Vicario shouting at him in the Leicester game and said, look, it's just one of those kind of hot moments, I think it was. Vicario explained it to him as, and they've spoken about it since, and it's all good. And he also spoke about his initiation song for Spurs. Do you know what it was? Did you read it? I try to remember if you read that one.
I did read your story, yes. It's the one that everyone would have guessed, I'm sure. I think you put a tweet out, didn't you, saying, I bet you can't guess what Swedish player sang for his initiation
I guessed
song.
the group. I don't know if I would have guessed the song.
No, quite. No.
Yeah, it was ABBA's Dancing Queen, which is, and he got booed. How rubbish that must be to get, not his performance, but to be as an 18-year-old having to do an initiation song and to get booed for it. I would have thought he'd sing like "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme" or something if he was going to do an ABBA one for Decky. But it didn't go down too well. It sounds like we haven't heard the other ones yet. I don't think what they've all sang. I feel like Solanke maybe spoken about it in a recent interview, but I can't remember what he said. I think it was something quite a cool song. I can't remember, but yeah, Dancing Queen. I'd love to see if there's any footage of that going around, because I can imagine how horrendous that could end up sounding if you're not going to nail it. But so a good break for him so far. And obviously they've played their 2 games, hopefully returning with no problems. They'll be the first 2 back, I think, of that main bunch. Radu Dragusin getting minutes for Romania. I think the last ones to come back will be Bissouma, Sonny, and Romero, unless I'm forgetting someone.
But it's quite good this time, isn't it? Because I was looking at it yesterday and thinking there are occasions and international breaks where some of the South American players can play late on a Wednesday night, so they then don't travel back until the Thursday morning for a game on Saturday or Sunday. Whereas this time, Cristian Romero's the one who's out in South America, obviously, and his game is at 9:30 p.m. our time on Tuesday, so today. So there is plenty of time for him to come back, and everyone else. He's the last one, so plenty of time for them to come back and essentially start training again with Spurs on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They'll obviously have a day off, probably one day off in that, won't they? Before the game on Sunday, or will they have 2?
It's whether you take the travelling day as a kind of a recovery day, perhaps. I wouldn't imagine he'd probably want to give him too much time off ahead of it, because this is the trouble, isn't it? Yes, Sunday's a good day to kind of have the game because it gives you that extra day. You still only have 3 to 4 training sessions with them. I was just looking at Destiny Doggy got some minutes as well. That was good. That kind of increased because he hasn't looked particularly sharp thus far, which is understandable. No. Bearing in mind he'd had been out since April, wasn't he? He had that surgery, so he's kind of still finding his feet after. Was it the Bayern game? Was his first minutes, wasn't it? I think. Getting him back. Pat Matasar's had minutes as well. Ben Davies and Brennan Johnson. Did you watch any of the Wales match yesterday? I watched
No, I didn't.
The conditions were dreadful.
Really?
So bad, like the rain and everything. And it's one of those where you're like, no, it's like guaranteed Spurs injury in the rain. Brennan Johnson, I think, was on the bench and ended up having to come on in the first half because of an injury. More minutes for them. Archie Gray started, I think, the first under-21s game for England, but didn't start the second one. So he'll have got a bit more game time, which is good for him. They've just kind of got to get through it. I think Wilson Odebear, France under-21s tonight, potentially. Basuma today as well. Sonny today. Like you say, Romero a little bit later. So, there is a little bit more time for them all to reconvene and hopefully be in a reasonable physical condition come Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, that's it. We've just got to get through Tuesday's games essentially now, and hopefully a clean bill of health comes back. And we're still looking at whether Dominic Solanke is going to be fit for Sunday. Obviously, we don't know if Richarlison is going to be fit for Sunday. Mickey van der Ven's obviously been working on the training pitches, missed the game against Newcastle, so hopefully he'll be fit. And if there's no problems on Tuesday, it's going to be interesting to see what who Ange will pick on Sunday. Essentially, before we kind of look at Sunday, we're going to do another podcast later in the week that will focus solely on the North London derby. So there, I've said it, the 3 words. We will look at that massive game later on in the week. So anyone expecting masses on the North London derby, we will talk a little bit about it very shortly. We'll have another podcast coming out on that. You wanted to talk about the players on loan as well, didn't you? I think you mentioned before we came on the pod that we probably didn't talk about Alfie Devine going to Westerlo. Is that how you say it? Westerlo in Belgium, and who else has gone out and what they're doing so far?
Absolutely. Just before we do that, only because I'm going to forget it if I don't mention it now. I haven't had time to look at it, but David Pleat's done an interview with the Telegraph talking about leaving Spurs after all these years, and one of the quotes, like the headline quotes, is Daniel Levy called me in and said, it's all data driven now. We don't need eyes and ears. What a nonsense, says David Pleat. It's an interesting one. David Pleat, he's recommended some good players over the years. I think Delhi was a big one of David Pleat's. And I certainly know of a few situations over the years where Spurs went in a different direction to the player that David Pleat told them to go for, and the player that he told them was the better option. One of them, if I remember correctly, I'm not going to name loads because otherwise it looks really rubbish, but one of them I remember pretty sure when they signed Jack Clark that David Pleat was suggesting Jared Bowen.
Yes.
And and obviously Jared Bowen's gone on to be a very effective Premier League player. Jack Clark still could, now at Ipswich, but when you look back, it kind of seemed like one was the more obvious deal. So that'd be interesting. I have a proper sit down and read in a little bit, but it's a long association with the club, but they have very much, with the Johan Langer way of doing things, have gone very much data driven, and it's a difficult one because in the modern world, excuse me, in the modern kind of football world, of course, there's a place for looking at players as well, like properly scouting them. But I do feel like Spurs going towards a more data-driven model kind of feels like the players they're signing are suiting the club and the way they want to play that a little bit better at the moment. So I'm kind of loath to really kind of have a massive go at the way they're doing recruitment when it actually seems to be working right now. So it's a difficult one. When you leave, when you're asked to, when something comes to a conclusion, there's always going to be strong emotions involved. Is probably the best way to put it. But
yeah, I don't know if I'm giving anything away, but I remember you kind of saying to me one of the first things. If I'm speaking off the record and giving something away, then great for all those people that are
I'm
about to
worried
hear
about
this.
what you're about to say.
No, but you when Ange Postecoglou came in, I think you'd mentioned to me that one of the first things he said when they're talking about players that they wanted to bring in, he was asking for the data on the players, and Spurs didn't have it for him, and he said, well, go back and get me the data, and then we'll talk about whether we want to bring them in or not.
Yeah, I think yeah, to not go too far down that road, I think Postecoglou is very keen for the club to modernise and go down that route. He was one that certainly, I think maybe Fabio Paratici is more a man that would deal with kind of just his feelings about players, his beliefs about players, ones that he'd seen with his own eyes, which, it still is, of course, a very effective way of doing things. And he was a guy that had seen a lot of players as well, and he had his successes in the transfer market as well. But I think when Postecoglou came in, it was very much okay, so where's the data on this? Where's this? Where's that? I want to see exactly why this player you're suggesting fits my system and things like that. And I think Postecoglou took a big kind of hold of that first transfer window, and they've all kind of worked, really. They haven't all been perfect. Like Ashley Phillips, obviously, is a young player that hasn't played yet, actually at all for the club, has he? Alejo Velis has kind of had a minimal impact, but that leads nicely into the loan roundup as well, with Alejo Velis and Ashley Phillips. So they're actually doing quite well, the players on loan. It's kind of working right now. We're only a game or two in, so we've got to kind of temper our expectations, but they all seem to have got headed out and kind of... Alfie Devine, we're going to start with him, of course.
Yes.
That was David Pleat. David Pleat distracted me. Alfie Devine's head off to Westerlo in the Belgian league, and it's... I think it's a good move for him in terms of the technique, and he'll play lots of minutes. Would it have been the ideal move at the start of the summer? No. I think his ideal destination probably would have been the Championship. And I think there were a lot of Championship clubs looking at him. And at the start of the window, Spurs were telling clubs, from what I understand, no, he's probably going to stick around, and then change their mind towards the end of the window when a lot of those clubs had then moved on to other targets. Yeah, I was still surprised in the last few days that he didn't get a move in England somewhere, but it's still, it could do a lot worse. It's a good move in terms of, like I say, the technique of that league. Playing with Luka Vuskovic as well, the young Spurs centre-back who will be joining the club in 2025. So that's quite a good thing, I think, in terms of helping Luka Vuskovic along as well, and having someone alongside him that he'll know when he comes to Spurs. He hadn't played obviously yet for Westerlo, Alfie Devine, because of the time he arrived. But we'll be keeping a close eye on him on football.london with all of his matches, and we can kind of keep an eye on Vuskovic at the same time there. But yeah, when I talk about successful loan moves, Brian Hill is having a great time at Girona. Started really, really well there. Scored a lovely goal a couple of games ago. Was involved in one of their goals the other just before the international break as well. I wouldn't be shocked if we see him have a terrific season there, and probably get involved in the Spain setup as well, because it's his happy place, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where he wants to be. It was one of those transfers that it was almost felt like you were kind of stealing him away from where he really wanted to be. He's not a Premier League player. He's got absolutely bundles of ability, and he worked incredibly hard to try to be a Premier League player. But just watching, I was watching some of the kind of extended highlights from his games for Girona, and he's just so comfortable and in the place he needs to be. And it's good for Spurs, really. If he can have a decent season, then his value kind of... I'm trying to think, would he be in the last year of his contract at that point? I'm trying to remember. They may have an option on him because he was a young player they signed. But ultimately, I think his value will be retained, which is a big thing. It's just about getting someone that can afford to buy him. But Girona, Champions League, it's a good location for him, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. They had a great season last year, and yeah, if he's already started kind of to show what he was showing in La Liga before, and as you say, back in a kind of a happy place for him, he'll be playing in a good league, in the Champions League as well. And yeah, as you say, again, my computer's so slow today. I can't look at how long his contract is, but that's the main thing, isn't it? When you send these players out on loan, you either want them to come back and force their way into the Tottenham setup, or you want to be able to sell them for a bit more than they were worth when you let them go on loan, essentially. And if he continues the way he is with Girona, then it will add a few pounds onto his price tag, essentially.
Yeah, it's 2026 his contract, so yeah, it is the last year when he if he returns next summer. I would, yeah, you never know. There may be an option in there because that's often what they do with the younger players. So yeah, all working very well for him. Alejo Velis scored his first goal for Espanyol. Lovely kind of 96th minute match-winning goal, which is what kind of all players dream of scoring. Very emotional interview after the game as well.
He
Where
was quite outspoken, wasn't he?
yeah, and he's had a rubbish year. You can kind of it's 2024 really. He's been a bit rubbish. He ended 2023 quite well. He scored, didn't he, against Brighton? But then I say he ended it well. He didn't end it that well actually because he then got injured against Bournemouth on the last day of the year, and was out for 2.5 months. So yeah, absolute rubbish statement that was. But he went to Sevilla, wasn't it, and just didn't play hardly any minutes whatsoever. So it was a massive moment for him, and you could see how much it meant to him. And he's starting every game for him and playing a fair bit of football. So yeah, good for him. And I wouldn't give up on Alejo Velis yet either. I still think he's got a lot of the raw talents to be a Premier League player. Unlike Brian Hill, he is physically he's far more suited to the Premier League. And if he has a good season, I'm sure they'll have a proper look at him next summer again. Manor Solomon had a really good start for Leeds in his first game. Lovely assist, really nice run down the left and teasing ball into the centre. Good move for him, I think, to get his confidence back and get just belief in his body again after, was it 10 months out with his knee problem. So going well for him so far. Do we count Højbjerg? I guess we just about do, because he hasn't moved off the Tottenham employee list yet because his obligation to buy with Marseille hasn't quite come in. But playing every minute, as you'd imagine there. He was their captain, I think, in the last game. He's become the Denmark captain as well. He has. Yeah, very much.
I haven't checked actually how Marseille are getting on because I thought that was a bit of a strange move for Roberto De Zerbi going there. I had the conversation with my brother-in-law as a Brighton fan, and just had a conversation about I thought De Zerbi would go on to bigger and better things from Brighton, and then my brother-in-law comes back and says, well, Marseille are a big club. And I said, well, you've taken me a little bit out of context there because Marseille are a big club, but it's a smaller league and they're not the big club that they used to be. I was expecting him to go to a kind of a bigger Premier League club or a Champions League club, a bigger Champions League club, essentially. So, yeah, I wanted to check on how Marseille would get on this year. And they've taken a lot of players from the Premier League, obviously, from De Zerbi knows well. So, it'll be interesting to see how they go and how Højbjerg goes there.
Yeah, they're unbeaten at the moment. They won 2, drawn 1. So, they started well. Who else we got? Ashley Phillips at Stoke. He's played a couple of games there. He's doing well. We got our colleagues at Stoke-on-Trent Live gave him a good review in their last game. 7.5 league debut, very big and strong. Literally carrying opponents on his back at one stage. I don't know what happened there. He's a big lad. Having kind of seen him a little bit kind of closer up, he's a proper unit. He's a big chap. Dane Scarlett, complete opposite, hasn't worked so far at Oxford. Barely got any time. Feels like a little bit of a retread of what happened with him at Ipswich last year. It's difficult because I don't think there was a huge amount of clubs queuing up for him.
No.
I think kind of it's difficult because I don't know why I keep saying it's difficult. He's a young striker who hasn't scored a lot of goals, and he's going to be judged on them. That's the problem. Yep. So if you're looking at him as a loan club, you're probably not looking at him thinking, that's the guy that's going to save us. That's the guy that's going to score all the goals to get us promoted or save us from relegation, whatever. So you kind of have to take what you can get. And unfortunately, very much looks like at Oxford, it's going to be a bit of a squad role. What have you thought? What have you made of Dane in recent years?
I'm going to say what you say. It's hard, isn't it? It's hard to tell, really. He's not been given many chances at Spurs. I don't think many of his loans have worked particularly well. It's hard to see him making it at the top level. Given, although how old is he now?
20. I think it might be 20, maybe.
He's still got time. When did Harry Kane break through? We will always go back to that, won't we? And the fact that it didn't quite work out for Harry Kane until it did. There was lots of loans that didn't work. It didn't look like he was going to get into the Spurs team. He worked his socks off. He worked hard, and that talent shone through along with his work ethic. Essentially, that's why Harry Kane made it. If Dane Scarlett continues to work hard and doesn't draw into himself as such, keeps going and keeps believing in himself. I think we have seen glimpses that there is talent there. There is a goal scorer in there. He just needs to believe it, and he needs to want it, really. But you do. I think most people will openly say we didn't see Harry Kane making it when he was going through those loans. I don't see Dane Scarlett making it, but it's on him to prove everyone wrong, like Harry Kane did, isn't it?
I thought you were going to launch into a rendition of "Don't Stop Believing." There,
one of my favourite songs, to be fair.
Yes, as used in The Sopranos to great effect. What else we got? Jamie Donnelly and Josh Keeley at Leyton Orient. Jamie Donnelly getting loads of game time there, which is fantastic. Tough situation. They need some wins there at Orient, but he is their kind of creative hub and very well thought of there. Josh Keeley has now moved there. He hasn't played yet. He kind of was whisked straight off on Republic of Ireland under 21 duty. But he will play for them, I would imagine. You don't bring in a decent keeper like that unless you're kind of feeling that he's probably going to be involved. I think they signed someone in the summer. His name has escaped me. I don't think he's started as well as maybe they'd hoped. So maybe Josh Keeley will they've seen that as a chance for him to get some minutes. Matthew Craig's doing very well for Barnsley. He's a real under the radar player, I think, in the whole kind of Spurs academy kind of setup. In that everyone's looking at those players who have headed off and done bits and pieces on loan. Matthew Craig's just been super. I think it was at Doncaster Rovers. I think it was last season. Did very well in the second half of the campaign, and he's gone to Barnsley in League One. He's just absolutely kind of keeping on going. He's 21 years old, Scotland under 21 international, defensive midfielder. He's taken to life in the senior game really well. He's probably one to keep an eye on. I don't know whether he'll still have a future at Spurs. We'll see. But certainly, I think he'll end up having a very good career ahead of him. Talking of a very good career ahead of him, George Abbott has played a couple of games now for Notts County. Made his first start the other day. Very much impressing everyone there. He got 90 minutes against Accrington in League Two at the weekend, and he's only 19 years old. Spurs under 21 skipper, very versatile, can play pretty much anywhere across your midfield or backline actually, and he's doing very well for himself. I was kind of told towards the end of last season, like, keep an eye on George Abbott because he's really developing a lot quicker than even they expected. It's difficult. I don't know why I'm saying it's difficult. It's my flu-riddled brain that keeps making me say that.
It's difficult for you to think about what's coming next.
It is. It's difficult for me to say a proper sentence. I would have liked to see George Abbott kind of being involved around the Europa League squad and getting minutes there. But it's that kind of eternal balance of he'll play loads more minutes at Notts County. And it probably development-wise will do better for him. But I would have loved to have seen him kind of... He's made his Premier League debut for Spurs. I think it was against Leeds United, end of the season, when Ryan Mason was the second caretaker spell. I would have loved to see him kind of add to that. And maybe it comes in the future, but no, he's doing very well. And the last one in the loan roundup is Kerry Blodorn, a young 19-year-old Spurs keeper who's currently at Aveley, National League South. and doing very well there, getting lots of minutes, lots of game time. Probably one of the lesser known names in the goalkeeping setup, but as I always say about goalkeeping loans, they're so difficult to get. There's so few spots out there and so few clubs looking to take a chance on a young player as their goalkeeper. So if you can get one, just go for it. And this will be a massive thing for him. I mean, Josh Cooney did it with Barnet last season. That was really important for his development. And a good move for him.
The one thing I take out of that is our friends at Stoke giving out half marks in their player ratings. Is this going to become part of what you do in your football.london player ratings?
I think it just gets too confusing. It probably would save me having people saying like, how have you rated him the same as him when he was rubbish and all that, whereas you could do a half mark. Player ratings are always so funny. When you look underneath them on social media, you'll have like, I'm going to use the name as an example. Like one person will be like, how have you given Sonny so much? Sonny was terrible today. And the next comment underneath was, you've really undermarked Sonny. He was excellent. You missed the bits where he did this great stuff with the pass and all that. And it's just like, you're never going to win because it's so kind of subjective. Yes, no, I'm not going to go down the half mark route.
Lovely. Before we finish off, we should have a little bit of a chat about the game that's rearing its head on Sunday. As I said earlier in the podcast, we will do another podcast later in the week that is fully focused on the North London derby. But we can't stop this edition without talking about the problems that they appear to be having down the road ahead of Sunday. New signing Riccardo Calafiori picked up a very strange injury when Italy beat France. Ousmane Dembele being challenged by Alessandro Bastoni, who was a Tottenham target at one point, and then kind of falling into Calafiori and hurting his calf on the way down. Calafiori then didn't play as not taking part in Italy's second game of the Nations League and has returned to Arsenal for assessment. And then last night, Monday night, if you're listening to it on Tuesday, if you're not, Martin Odegaard, the captain of Arsenal, limping off in Norway's game against Austria, and was seen boarding a plane, assumingly back to England on crutches as well. So, yeah, it could be an interesting few days for Arsenal ahead of the North London derby on Sunday, couldn't it?
We're so kind of bred to have cynicism about whatever the North London derby thing. You kind of, part of you almost thinks like it's just an elaborate ruse. They're all in on it, kind of thing. He was never injured. To having seen the Odegaard moment that it happened, he does properly go over on the ankle. It doesn't look good, and he looks in a lot of pain in the immediate aftermath.
It's not going to change Ange Postecoglou's mindset or anything whatsoever. He'll play with what is in front of him, but it just changes the mindset of the fans a little bit, doesn't it? In the next few days.
Yeah, and I think look, there's no getting away from the fact that if they're not going to have a first choice midfield, it obviously offers a bit of an advantage to Spurs over what it would have been. Declan Rice suspended, he would have been, a real linchpin in the middle of that midfield. And if Odegaard doesn't make it, then that's their kind of probably one of their biggest creative hubs, other than Saka not able to play. We'll see. As like I say, the cynicist in me, or the cynic even in me, can still see Sunday afternoon every single player that's ever been potentially injured lining up against Spurs. It's a funny week because Spurs could potentially have, hopefully, players like Solanke and Van der Ven back. That's what we're hoping. We'll wait to see what Postecoglou says on that. Everyone's always like, you can't see them in the training videos. And it's like, no way on earth would Spurs put them in training videos ahead of a North London derby. If they are back training as of yet, or if they are going to be, I would be pretty certain Spurs wouldn't until the last moment admit that they're back there and training. But yeah, I mean, we'll talk about all this kind of more in the next pod, but it's a game where it's going to have a really interesting kind of indicator on where the season goes in the next couple of weeks. Just the start of the season, really, because I think if you lose it and it's a poor performance, then it just kind of puts this real dampener on Postecoglou's second season. It just starts it all off in a bit of a negative, and obviously fan anger after a derby is always at its kind of highest. Whereas if they win or put in a really good performance that maybe gets a draw, but I would have, I think obviously a win is, of course, is the best thing. Then I think it absolutely kickstarts the entire season, regardless of whether they had a couple of players missing or not. I think it absolutely kind of pushes them on in the weeks ahead when you've got all the Carabao Cup and Europa League games to come as well. And Brentford's not an easy game, neither's Man U away and things like that. I think it just gets all of the confidence rolling and the momentum going, because I don't think Spurs have played badly this season. I think they've had 3 quite decent performances. They just have either had a couple of dopey moments at the back, or they've had moments at the front where they haven't put the ball in the net when they needed to and really should have done. And I think if they play in the way that they've been playing against Arsenal, but just show a little bit more of a clinical edge and a little bit more awareness at the back in little moments, then I think they'll be okay. If they don't, then it could go horribly wrong. But they're games I never like. I never enjoy these games. Even after a win, it's very difficult to kind of get your mindset into the fact that it's actually happened. But yeah, I think it'll be a good game, to be honest. I think it's 2 teams that aren't going to sit back. I think they're both going to try and play some decent football. Crowd are going to play a big part as well. And if they can kind of be in their best voice, I think that'll have a big impact on it. And I think if he can get Solanke and Van der Ven, that's huge if they're available, because you suddenly have a focal point for your attacks and you have your pacey defender at the back that makes such a difference with the high line. So, they could be big factors in the game.
Yeah, I think we're going into it, and I think if you really look at it, I think you probably should have 2 teams that are on 9 points going into the game. I think lots of Spurs fans would say that they would probably deserve to beat Leicester given the first half performance, and dominated for large periods against Newcastle, and probably deserved to win that game as well. Arsenal probably would have beaten Brighton if Declan Rice hadn't got sent off. So it would have been an incredible occasion if there had been both teams 100% records going into it. As it is, you're kind of looking at both teams and thinking, well, they both need the points now. If Arsenal are going to do what they've done in the last 2 seasons and really challenge Manchester City, they can't afford to be dropping more points at this early stage of the season. And given how Spurs have played, you can't be dropping more points with only 4 on the board from 3 games for an Ange Postecoglou's second season. So yeah, there's always a lot riding on it, but it does feel like early in the season there's a huge amount riding on it for both teams already this season.
Yeah, I mean, after the first game at Leicester, Postecoglou was already talking about we've lost a couple of points on the teams at the top. So it's like he will not want to lose anymore. He want to see this as a big game to get back up there, because I still believe that he believes that it's going to be a season where they want to be right up there challenging amongst it all. So yeah, it's a big game, but we shall talk about that more later in the week.
Yes, we shall. Yes. Join us again for another podcast later on in the week. Yeah, all things North London Derby in that second podcast. And make sure you stick to football.london for all your Tottenham news this week. Please come and read our content in a boring international break. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/guest. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and you'll help support this podcast. The link is in the episode description box.